let's talk about Havertz. So obviously Havertz is looking like a player that's divided opinion in the fan base. A lot of people are for him, some are against him. But the thing is, like, people are going too extreme on either side, you know. But I always say the truth is always somewhere in the middle. It's never completely on one side or completely on the other side. The ones who are for him, for example, would praise him for the simple things that footballers should be doing, like work rate, winning duels, and situations like this. Meanwhile, the ones who are completely against him are completely calling him a useless player for us, a waste of money, and all these sort of things. For me, as I mentioned already, the truth is always somewhere in the middle. And for example, he's not a trash player and he's not been having a great season either. So both things can be right. It's not just one or the other. However, what does Havertz bring to us? Havertz is a very good player. He's a very talented player. Yes, he's not performing at the moment, but he's still a very talented player. I'm sure Arteta didn't sign him just for the first 4 games of the season. He would have signed him knowing about his skill set, what he brings to the team, what he offers, and what he can possibly get out of him. And for me, what I feel like Arteta sees in this situation is that he sees a player who has great movement, fantastic spatial awareness. He's a guy who in the box he knows where to make the runs into, and if you can consistently make runs into the far post, into the near post, behind defenders, you're going to score goals. So he's a goal for it in that sense. Of course, his finishing hasn't been great, especially in the Premier League, but when you have great movement and you constantly get into great positions, if you play for a very creative team, you're going to score goals. And that's what Arteta sees in him. He sees someone like a Thomas Muller, someone like a Dele Alli, players like whereby a lot of the things they did was off the ball, but they came alive in the box. They knew where to run. We've already seen it this season already where he makes his late runs into the box. He hasn't been found, and also at times he hasn't taken the chance when he got to him, but he's making those movements. And we've seen his qualities even when he was in Germany for Leverkusen. He has the quality to do these things. He just hasn't been able to put it together properly. And I feel like playing for a team like us who's very creative, he's going to get situations whereby he's able to get into these places and he'll be able to score these goals. So I don't think he's a rubbish player or anything like that. I think he's a very talented player that if the system around him is right, he's going to score goals. We saw the system around Thomas Muller was right. He scored goals. System was the same with Dele Alli, also for Tottenham, and he scored goals as well. I think that's the same thing for Havertz. The way I see it as well, I did mention before about how if you look at some of the teams this season, like your Brighton and your Man City, some of these teams are starting to play more like they're trying to go back to playing with 2 strikers. You look at Brighton with Ferguson and Pedro. The other game was also Ferguson and with Warbeck behind him. You look at Man City playing with Haaland and Alvarez. We're starting to see some of these teams start to play with 2 strikers, because when you think about it, and the teams who are doing this are Brighton and Man City, obviously Pep and De Zerbi, who are managers who like to dominate the game, like to dominate possession, like to control the game. They trust their defenders to build the ball up out the back and get to the final third. So if you have the belief in your organization and you know that you can get the ball from back to front, then the best thing for you to possibly do is to get more players in the box. Because if you trust your build-up play, knowing that you don't need the midfielders for you to build up play because you've got great defenders that can build out the back, then it's not a negative for you to have an extra striker in your team rather than having an extra midfielder, because that means you have an extra player in the box that can give you a goal. So you see that with Pep, for example, now he's got Rodri and Kovacic in midfield, and rather than going with an extra midfielder again, he's just gone with an extra striker with Alvarez, and we've seen how that's done for them already. We see with Haaland stretching the play like a target man, holding the ball up and things like that, and then you see Alvarez making those runs off the ball and attacking the box for him and getting goals like that. We see the same thing with João Pedro, and we see the same with Ferguson at Brighton. So I feel like from the way I see it, the idea that I feel like Arteta has in his mind for how we want to play is that he wants to play with 2 strikers. So for him, that's probably Gabriel Jesus and Havertz. And if you're going to have Havertz, who, like I said already, who is sort of like a target man who can make these runs into the box, and you got Gabriel Jesus, who, one of the things with Gabriel Jesus last season was that, yes, he was getting into the box and getting into the situation, but he wasn't scoring enough goals because he was doing a lot of stuff outside the box. Now, flip it when you think about Havertz, who the criticism with Havertz at the moment is that he's not really doing too much stuff outside the box, rather than just his movement into the box. So you put them 2 together and you feel like, I can see what Arteta's trying to do, where you could have Gabriel Jesus being the one who's dropping deep, linking up play, bringing players in, dribbling, carrying the ball, finding players in the box and stuff like that, whilst you have Havertz utilising the space that Gabriel Jesus has opened up to attack the box. Because we know already, as I mentioned, Havertz, one of his best assets is the movement, his intelligence. He knows where to be, he knows what areas to attack. And if he continues to do that in a team that's creative like this, he's going to score goals. So I feel like That's probably the idea that Arteta had in his head when he saw what Havertz could bring in. So it's not just when you think about, obviously people are looking at it more like Xhaka played that role last season, but it's not as simple as Xhaka playing that role if you think about it, because we continue to evolve as a team. Yes, Xhaka played that role, but but the role that Havertz is playing right now is not the exact replica of that role, because when Havertz has the ball, his responsibility, yes, he's going to try and support the team as we build up play and try to go forward, but his responsibility is to get close to the striker, get in the box, attack the box. We've seen this already compared to someone like what Odegaard is doing in the build-up play, or compared to what Xhaka was doing last season. Havertz is more like a striker, so it's more of like what Xhaka was doing last season. We've taken the offensive part of it. So Xhaka last season was giving us the offensive part, but it was also giving us like him dropping. At times you see he would drop close to Zinchenko, so whilst Zinchenko would overlap him. If you remember the early parts of the season last year, there was times where Zinchenko would overlap Martinelli on the left. Martinelli would go centrally and Xhaka would cover the left back. Obviously, Havertz is not going to be offering that. But what Xhaka was doing a lot offensively was he was attacking the box, making runs off the striker, getting into the box and scoring goals in that way. That's what we're specifically getting out of Havertz. So it's like Arteta's taking the offensive part of Xhaka's game in that role and just amplified it more with Havertz, who is more natural in that position and who knows more what to do in this position, and who's obviously he's better technically in the box, in terms of like in tight spaces. It will be more natural to him than Xhaka receiving in his positions. So I feel like that's the idea that Arteta has of Havertz and how to utilize him, which is why when people are making this comparison like, oh, he's not a midfielder, he's not this, that's because that's not how Arteta wants to use him. Arteta's using him as a second striker. Yeah, and that's it. And obviously, and even then, I feel like what I'm really surprised about already is that Havertz has shown very good work rate defensively. Even he drops deep next to Rice. Of course, like last season we were playing with a 4-4-2 whilst with Xhaka dropping next to Partey. But this season we're playing more of a 4-1-4-1 where both Havertz and Odegaard are dropping either side of the defensive midfielder, which is Rice this season. And so rather than defending in a 4-4-2, we're actually defending in a 4-1-4-1, which is the way you defend normally in a 4-3-3 shape. So both Havertz and Odegaard are dropping deep. But Havertz is, like I said, the ones who are praising Havertz are praising more of the defensive work rate that he's been doing this season. And his defensive work rate has been really good this season already. So it's like we're not losing out on what Xhaka offered us in duels and defensively, but we're amplifying more of what he offered offensively in that sense. So that's why I say obviously where we lose out is more in the build-up play. But again, this is where someone like Zinchenko becomes very, very important to the team, because for this to work and for every other team that does it, which is Brighton, who they're playing with two strikers, and Pep at City, who they're playing with two strikers, you need to have fantastic build-up. You need to have great build-up. You need to trust your team to be able to move the ball out the back to the front. If you don't have great build-up and you can't get the ball out the back to the front, then you can't play with two strikers. Then in the end, you're most likely going to have an extra midfielder to support your build-up. But with Arteta feeling that he can have Havertz in midfield on paper, but in reality being a second striker, then that's the reason why he's got Zinchenko. That's why the inverted role is so important. That's why he's got Zinchenko moving into midfield to support Declan Rice, to build up play out the back for us to get the ball into the final third. So behind the ball, you've got Gabriel, you've got Saliba, you've got White, who are all fantastic at building up the ball out the back. Then you've got Zinchenko and Declan Rice, who can both build up play with passing and carrying the ball. This is again where Rice becomes important, because Rice is not just able to build up play. Like last season, we had both Partey and Zinchenko building up play with specifically passing. Of course, what Partey has is not so much of the long bursting dribbling that Rice has, but he has in terms of like he's able to dribble in tight spaces to create new angles to then find a player between line. But what Rice brings instead is that he's able to carry the ball out the back and take it forward. So that gives us another way of progressing the ball. So we're not just progressing the ball with passing, we're also progressing the ball with carrying as well. And that's the combination we have with both Zinchenko and Declan Rice. So that part of the build-up is so important. And I feel like Arteta, for me, he has huge belief in the pressing and his organisation out of possession, which is why he's very focused on how we look in position rather than how we look on paper. Because on paper, yes, you see a midfield of Havertz, Odegaard and Rice, and you feel like, yes, that could, you might not be able to build up play in a certain way how you want, specifically, rather than if you were to have a midfielder that could build up play better, which I've said that we do need a midfielder that can do that, because you can't always play that same way in every single game. However, Arteta trusts our organization off the ball so much. He trusts the fact that when we're shaping that 3-2, we have Saliba, Gabriel White, Zinchenko and Rice that can build up play and get the ball into the final third. And the fact that he trusts that means he can trust Havertz to not be responsible in terms of build up play, but to just stay in the final third and wait for the ball to arrive to him. You see what I mean? So if Arteta, once you trust your build-up play to get a ball into the final third, then you can line up in that sort of way. This is how Man City were lining up when they had David Silva, De Bruyne, Sane, Sterling, and a striker, because they trust the build-up. They trust the fact that they can get the ball out the back and get it to the final third. So because we do that, because Arteta trusts that, and he has huge belief in that sense, that's the reason why we're able to play with two strikers, and why he has the belief that we can play with two strikers and still have balance. So yeah, that's just my view of that's my view of Havertz, and how I feel Arteta looks at him and sees him in this system, and why he feels confident that this could work.